I did want to go over this article while we eat. I didn't really read it, but I did want to take a look at it with you guys and see what your thoughts are. Of course, as well as share my own thoughts, right? As I eat some of these nacho fries. So, article is written by Hardcore Gamer, and it's talking about all the things that AGS has done over basically since the release and all of the kind of like not so great things that happened, right? And there's a section here that talks about like what the what AGS has done right. Yeah, this is not the art interview with Rocks. That one we saw a while back. That was leaked a while back. Is this you, Playback? Oh shit! Playback Adam Beck? Damn! It's Playback's article. And Playback, a regular viewer of the stream, of course, plays this game regularly. So this article probably has very relevant stuff and like very, there's a lot of like research and a lot of like, experience that goes into it, right? And I want to read it and just share my thoughts and see how accurate or inaccurate this article is. But so here we go. So February 2022 marked Amazon Games' biggest release by a significant margin. We're of course talking about Lost Ark, the Korean MMORPG from Smilegate that launched with a peak concurrent player count of over 1.3 million. I mean, definitely this is Amazon Games' biggest game for sure. This was Amazon's second venture into the genre, with the Western MMORPG New World coming out the fall prior. The difference was New World was a brand new property developed in-house at their Orange County studio, whereas Lost Ark was already an established property overseas. Having a few years of contents to reference and being a PvE-focused experience, because of this, there was even more hype around its release. And rightfully so. There was a deep grind at the end game, something that continues to this day. It was apparent that the established world was this majestic combination of fantasy and steampunk, and the combat was some of the best in the genre. 100% true. It was a launch like we'd never seen before. Cut to today, 32 months after its release in the West, while updates to Lost Ark remain at a steady pace, it has faltered significantly over these many months, and a good portion of it can be contributed to Amazon Games' mishandling of the product. I agree. And I'm glad that you didn't say like, all of it was due to AGS's mishandling, because that's definitely not true. It definitely was many factors that go into it, and AGS does have a piece, have a hand at it, right? So first of all, Fiongate, the first domino. The font here is very weird. That looks like a capital I, but it's not. The first major blunder on Amazon's part is without a doubt Fiongate. This occurred within the first year of the game's release, specifically November 2022, where AGS mistakenly gave a gift to players, but instead of being one per account, it was given to every single character on your roster. The initial gift wasn't anything spectacular, 10 Fions, but it was still a nice little bonus from Amazon if you had multiple characters. Unfortunately, the way Amazon handled it was atrocious. Agreed. While we'll never be a fan of Fions, as they're essentially a tax when buying items off the market board or trading, they're still essential to Lost Ark as a whole. I mean, and this isn't anything about it. I'm not sure if I would say it's like a tax for purchasing items, because we already have a tax, right? There's already a tax for Fion, for the market, and that's the tax that we pay when we list items, right? It's a tax for the buyer, sort of, and the reason why I don't really say it's a tax is more because it's doesn't essentially operate as a way, because like I feel like a lot of MMOs, can I look at order? Yeah, sure. I feel like a lot of MMOs, when they talk about taxes, usually it's a way to kind of like control currency and prevent inflations and things like that. Usually the tax kind of goes into the ether, basically, right? And Fions, the money that you use, like for Fions, it doesn't go into the ether. Because when you get Fions, for the most part, people are exchanging blue crystal for it, right? They're buying the Fions using gold because they use blue crystal. And the blue crystal essentially is here to power this currency exchange. If nobody bought blue crystal, then nobody would be able to buy gold. So in a way, it kind of is a tax, but also in another way, I'm not really entirely sure I would really consider it a tax. It's just more a way for them to power this whole kind of machinery that is the real money exchange. That's how I see it, right? So I don't really see it as a tax, but that's nothing against, it's just semantics and whatever, right? Buying your relic accessories was costly back then because of it. So getting a new Fion like this helped propel the player base significantly by allowing them to properly build their character a little better. It was not meant to be, though, as Amazon went back on their gift and have actually removed the Fions from everybody's account. This means that if you had already spent the gifted Fions, you were looking at negative value in your currency. Gotta love that. There was no better opportunity or layup to show that you care about your players than accepting this mistake and making them feel loved at the end of the year, and yet Amazon blew it 100%. I feel like when you as a publisher or a developer, whatever it might be, makes a mistake on your game, and this was the big criticism, right? When you make the mistake, right, you don't take away from the players. You give them, compensation, right? When it's your mistake, you give them compensation, which is why we get all these compensation rewards when like extended maintenance or whatever it might be. So it was definitely really bad decision making. Whoever made that, I don't know if they're still at the company, but definitely that was a really big fumble. This was a first poor decision to blow up in Amazon's face. I was just getting back into Lost Ark at the time, and even I had heard about the issue. It soured the relationship of a lot of players with Amazon and sent Lost Ark in a downward trajectory. For sure, for sure. I don't know like how far it spiraled the game down, but at least it definitely left a lot of people with a sour taste in their mouth for sure. So Fion Gate was terrible. I mean, we're not going to mince words, right? That was not good on Amazon's part. They definitely fucked up, and probably one of their biggest fuck ups, in my opinion, to this day. Like there was no excuse for what they did. There wasn't even like if you interpret this way or that way, or like they were let under a lot of pressure, blah blah blah. It wasn't anything like that. It was just clearly bad decision making. Bots and bans. The next major event actually happened a couple months after the events of Fion Gate. While everyone's still reeling from what could only be considered a betrayal of trust, Amazon began their fight against bots. This isn't something unique to Lost Ark, as it plagues virtually every MMO. There will be bots running around, and the main goal of most of them is to earn as much gold as possible to sell in illicit real money transactions, RMT. In January 2023, Amazon launched their initiative to flag bots and ban them automatically. In theory, this was a great plan, as it's hard to look through thousands of reports of bots and determine how legitimate they are. Unfortunately, this backfired immensely. Like a rogue AI, we began to see not only legitimate players getting hit, but also bans on players who hadn't even logged in almost a year. On top of the various reports, we knew a couple players who had played Lost Ark when it first launched and decided it wasn't for them and uninstalled, and they received bans on their accounts. Worse yet, this ban would show up on your Steam account. While not as bad as getting hit with a VAC ban, it could still affect specific games based on when you last received a ban for another game. While there were issues here and there from false bans until now, Amazon actually improved their track record over 23-24. They've done good work fighting the bots, but RMT still remains rampant. Thankfully, nothing monumental would deter the experience, at least until October 24. I actually didn't realize that they had this whole like thing where people who are not even playing the game got banned. I definitely knew there were like a good number of false positives, but I didn't realize that people who weren't even playing the game got banned. That is insane. And that is all due to the AI, I guess, that they created. And honestly, like the AI thing that they're doing at AGS, even like down to like the trusted status stuff, has never been good. So I'm hoping that they either improve their AI system or try to lean a little bit less on it, because as we've seen with like the bot bans, but also like the most recent trusted system, that never went really well. They got Steam bans too. That's really bad. When it goes beyond Lost Ark, especially when it's like a mistake on your end, hitting the other games is like so dumb. But you know, they were trying something out, right? They had so many bots. They had to try to find a way to fix it, and this was one of their solutions, and it was not a very good solution, unfortunately. But honestly, I have to say that I agree they've done a lot of work fighting bots, but I'm not sure if RMT remains super rampant. And maybe this is just more of like a wording thing and like makes it sound good in the article. But I actually think that RMT has kind of died down quite a bit in the recent times. We were actually just talking about it on the podcast, but it feels like to me RMT is definitely not as rampant. Like when I go into Party Finder, for example, right? When I'm looking at the latest content, if RMT was super rampant, I feel like I'd see a lot more people 1710, max gems, things like that. But for the most part, everybody's pretty like modest, I guess, with their item levels. I don't know. I don't know about bots situation. Like I've definitely seen bots in chaos, like the chaos gate and stuff, because of like recently with the ignite servers. But RMT wise, I don't know. I feel like I rarely ever see somebody who looks like a clear RMTer. This guy maybe, right? This guy maybe. I don't know. But I think the people who are RMTing are just like, it's not as widespread. I think like the people who are RMTing are probably doing peer to peer for the most part, and bot sites like G2G are not getting as much traffic as it used to get. Well, bots is a separate thing from RMT, I think. Like you can have a lot of bots, but not a lot of RMTers. I mean, sort of like it's like a wave thing, right? Because like a decrease in RMTers won't necessarily immediately decrease the number of bots. It might take a little bit of time to decrease the bots, because less RMTers means less business for the bots, and then you know they don't see it as worth to bot in your game anymore. Yeah, peer to peer is very hard to tell, but I think at least for G2G bot RMTing, I feel like there's less of it from what I can see. And there's definitely a lot like less people talking about RMTers in general, but maybe that's just because there's like a lot of other problems in the game right now. But to me, I feel like if RMTing was super like as rampant as it was during its peak, I feel like I'd see a lot more people, right? And I mean, in the first place, us having such hard time finding parties, I feel like wouldn't be as much of a case. Now, granted, you know, the people could be RMTing on their mains and other supports and stuff like that, but still, I do think that I have seen a fair bit less of RMTing in general. Just look at the market is not much less. I mean, you can see also in the gold, the gold market, right? When RMT is really bad, the gold inflation is super high, right? And I'd say right now it's fairly modest. It's not that bad. 2000 in the 2000s, I'd say in general it's okay. People at Egg Your Harmon debating 200k for the box in pubs. I wonder how much disposable income they have. All I can say is from what I can see with like these prices, right? When botting was really bad, when RMT was really bad, the price of gold was like the sale price of gold was like 4,000 something in like the 4,000s. That's when it was really bad, right? Right now in the 2000s, low 3,000, it's not terrible to me at least. So, you know, maybe it's just TV because more people were spending gold on like voting, but I also don't think it's a gold problem for honing right now. It's a material problem. Materials are the gating factor. And you can see from like people's holding, right? Nobody's really holding to that high. I rarely ever see any 1700s, 1710s. It's something I pretty much never see. Again, this guy's doing buses, right? So he's clearly got a lot of money, but like even like this one, right? Full AFK hard mode bus, 1685. Like, and like people aren't like decked out in relics either. Like, you look at these people, they don't have like crazy relic books either. So it's definitely, it seems like, to me at least, it's not as bad as it used to be. It's not that it's not existent, but it just seems less so. All I would say is I do think that they had definitely they'll never solve the problem of RMT, right? They'll never solve the problem of bots. They'll never solve the problem of RMT. But I definitely think that over time it's definitely gotten better, and I don't remember a time where RMT was this, at least to me on the surface, non-existent. Of course, there still are RMTers, but it hasn't seemed very rampant lately, at least. Contrary to what this says right here. Again, it goes up, down, right? It's always a constant battle, but it seems a little bit better, especially now with like them seemingly having more harsh penalties for people doing things against TOS. So next, tier 4 bugs. Messy start to an exciting new saga. It's hard to believe that Amazon Games delayed tier 4 by 2 weeks, because even with the extra time, the biggest update since its release was a buggy mess. While we won't go into every bug that was found, it's safe to say that there were a lot of unhappy players. Right out the gate, the first major bug was that the main story was completely inaccessible, which is crazy. It took more than 24 hours before Amazon was able to rectify the situation with Tier 4 would finally be let loose. Now, did they perma all the exploiters? They did not perma all the exploiters. It was like a spectrum, right? It depended on how much you exploited. There were permas that were handed out, though. There were definitely many permas that were handed out, which I commend them for doing, because for the longest time with RMTers, right? The whole meme was that, you just RMT, you get off with like a nice little slap on the wrist, 3-day ban, 7-day ban, whatever, come back with negative gold, but then your gear is all honed up and whatever, right? So that was the meme, but they actually went and handed out permabans this time, which I commend them for, because I was thinking about this throughout the entire podcast when we were talking about it. But really, the reason why so many people exploited was because Amazon had built up this culture that basically kind of, in a way, promoted people to exploit and do things against TOS, because there was pretty much no consequence for doing it. The worst thing that would happen is a 3 to 7 day ban, and you're like, okay, well, I exploit these boxes, I get a ton of stuff, I get slapped in the wrist for 3 to 7 days, we're good to go, right? They can't permaban us. And then they permaban people, and they also literally anywhere, like, if you exploited more than one time, basically a set of the boxes, you were banned for 2 weeks. I mean, for at least a month, because it was 3 to 7 was 2 weeks, right? Beyond that, for like 8 boxes was a month, which in my opinion was pretty heavy-handed given their past track record of bans. And honestly, I think they need to keep doing it, because them not doing anything and giving people major consequences for breaking the rules has created a culture where people feel like it's okay to break the rules and you can just get away with it. For you who exploited many times, perma seemed apt. Oh, 100%. A kingdom ruled by fear is not a kingdom not worth ruling, right? Yeah, totally. It definitely, like, it's with anything. The only reason why online gamers follow the rules is because they have a fear of getting their hard spent time taken away from them, right? Like, who's gonna, like, it was like Cody said, like, who the fuck is gonna go and risk their 7,000 hour account for a split, like a tiny little exploit, right? The reason why people did it was because they just didn't think they could get banned for it. They didn't think there were going to be any consequences because of the track record of AGS. And now that they've actually put some sort of consequence into it, people are going to be less incentivized to do it. Even, like, what should we call it? During the thing with the egg year, letting people go into egg year early in EU, some people did come into my chat and was like, hey, I don't think I would touch it. I don't want to risk getting banned, right? Of course, there were people who did still go do it, and they got fucked because if they didn't clear it, they didn't get their they didn't get their ticket back that week, but they didn't get banned, right? But still, there were people who were afraid of doing it because they were like, I don't want to get banned. But yeah, so they needed to do this, and I'm glad they did it. Tier 4. So Tier 4 came out, and it was a buggy mess, right? And it's kind of like what Cody said. Literally, the Tier 4 update was like 4 months of updates in one patch. It was like 4 months of updates in one patch, which is crazy, right? So there's gonna be bound to be bugs, but it definitely shouldn't have been as buggy as it was. Like, the thing is, at the end of the day, I don't know how much of it was Amazon's problem. Because the thing is, Amazon is given basically a version of the game, right? That they're gonna push out to to us. They were given it by Smilegate. And they got extra 2 weeks, but did Smilegate edit the game within those 2 weeks? I don't know, right? We won't never know unless we're behind the scenes. It definitely, the T4 story thing, if they were able to play test the game and Smilegate didn't edit the thing for the 2 weeks, 100% that should have been play tested. It 100% should have been play tested. If they got the package from Smilegate, right? The version of the game from Smilegate, and had 2 weeks to play it without any edits, 100% something that obvious should have been detected by AGS. It is definitely inexcusable. Now, one potential thing that I could be thinking about is their whole thing and their main focus was Ignite servers, right? Because if you think about it logically, on their perspective, they have a certain amount of time to play test everything, right? So, and everything else was already existing in Korea. Tier 4 was existing in Korea. The like Hyper Awakenings already existed in Korea, right? All those things existed in Korea. So in their mind, the only new thing that has been introduced is Ignite servers. And that's what they needed to play test the most, because in Korea, clearly the other stuff worked, right? So they're probably like, if we have a priority, it's going to be Ignite servers. That's what I'm thinking, right? So if they had time to play test it and everything like that, they probably play tested Ignite servers and then made sure that was okay and then pushed the game out. And then they found out that the main story was inaccessible. Whatever the patch that Smilegate gave them had these issues, right? So that's kind of the thing that I think about when this happens. And there was also that thing a while back that we were looking at about edge cases, right? Usually like there's a lot of stuff that people playtest for as developers, and like they can't test every single thing out. So a lot of the things like the stronghold like bug and like the exploit and all these things, it would have been hard for them to playtest if they had the time to do it. Now, again, the T4 storyline, I think that they definitely should have gotten that. They're probably focused on testing the Ignite server, and that's what ended up happening. If it was a Planet Hill Satisfyers made everyone go and play on Ignite, it kind of did have that consequence, right? But I don't think that we can necessarily blame Amazon for a lot of this. It's definitely partly their fault for not being able to test it out, but they probably had certain priorities that they were trying to do, which made it so that it was probably very hard for them to test it out, especially for the Tier 4 storyline. But again, definitely a big fumble, right? And the fact that it took 24 hours before Amazon was able to rectify the situation, I personally think that they should have taken the game down right after they figured out that this was an issue. Just cut the game down, put it on maintenance for like 2 hours, then let it back up, right? I think they definitely should have done that. But the reason why, in my opinion, they probably didn't do that is because it already got delayed by like, 2 hours, right? And then on top of that, they had all these streamers that they had sponsored to play the game. So they had all these streamers who potentially, if they took the game down for another 2 hours, right, and then brought it back up, those streamers might have ended their stream already. And that was probably something that they didn't want to go through. And that's the reason why that they didn't end up taking the game down, which honestly, again, I think was the wrong decision. They should have just been like, all right, guys, I'm really sorry. I know we sponsor you guys for the stream, but there's an issue. Can you guys do do it tomorrow, or do it like, an extra week after the 4 weeks that we gave you? We're really sorry this happened. Something like that. Goes BK. 4 was updates in 1, plus a whole new system that hadn't been done in Korea. I can't blame him for much bugs. Plus, they gave us time to do queues for XP and doing night server stuff. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a lot of stuff, right? And it's not that, I wouldn't say that you can't blame them per se for like having all these bugs. Again, I think the majority of the blame goes towards Smilegate for having all these bugs, in my opinion. But they definitely should have tried to see if they could playtest at least the basic part of like tier 4 main mission. So yeah, second bug was unfortunately less of an issue because Amazon was able to calculate and reimburse players for the time, but Chaos Dungeons were given incorrect amounts of Destiny shards. This was important early on because players were looking to quickly push the egg year raid as soon as possible, even though it was 2 weeks out, and considering the bottleneck so early on would be shards, it put a damper on things. And personally, I do think that it's kind of crazy that we didn't get any official notice from them like earlier on with this bug, because I feel like this bug was probably found out day 1, but I personally didn't find this out until a couple days in, at least, because it was never reported anywhere. Like literally somebody in chat told me that this was an issue. I'm like, what is it? So I do wish that they let us know earlier on, because what ended up happening was I didn't know it was a bug, so I ended up buying packs to make up for like some of the missing shards, because I was like, oh damn, I need more packs to hone, whatever, right? KR knew this bug, really? Interesting. So I'm really interested in see why they did that, but this was definitely an issue that did come up. Speaking of Igor, there were players in Europe who had access to the raid even before it had become available to masses. We talked about this earlier. This was because the raid itself was in the game, but was presumably locked behind a timer. And unfortunately for Amazon, that time ended up being before the scheduled server maintenance, so we saw some players getting in before the reset. And I think, honestly, this goes back to what I always say about Amazon. I have no fucking clue why they cannot stick to a single time where they do their maintenance, their weekly maintenance. Sometimes it's at 12. Sometimes it's at 1. Sometimes that's 2. I don't fucking know why they change their maintenance time, their weekly maintenance time, all the time. There is no other game that does this. Every single game that I know has a very consistent, hey, the game's going down at this time, at this day, every single week. Yeah. And they don't like, they're not like, oh, sorry, this week is going to be a little different because of XYZ. They're just like, all right, guys, it's going to be this time. Like, not to mention it takes forever from the baseline and also extend it further. Extensions are unavoidable. I feel like extensions are unavoidable, which they usually don't extend all that often, in my opinion. But definitely the inconsistent timing, I don't know why they do that so often. And it was because of this inconsistent timing that this whole thing with Egg happened. Like, this whole thing with EU being able to access Egg happened because of the inconsistent timing. If they took the game down at the same time, 12 a.m. PST, right, during this day, it wouldn't have happened, because the game would have been down and EU would not have been able to access the game, access the raid. But for some reason, that week they decided, hey, we're going to push the maintenance out for another 2 hours. And then during that time, EU ended up being able to go in. Yeah, if you did it on EU and it got fucked, that's honestly true. Which is why I was saying earlier, a lot of people were afraid to do it. And those people who were afraid to do it definitely benefited, right? Because they didn't get like stuck in the middle of the raid. Now, some people cleared the raid all the way through, but some people didn't. Most of the people didn't, and they lost their entry, which I think is, rightful. Like, rightfully so. If you exploit, this is technically an exploit, right? You fuck around and you find out. It was because the raid itself was in the game, but was presumably locked down timer. Unfortunately, Amazon. Blah blah blah. Oh wait, we already read this, right? So there's that. There's also this bug in Gate 3 of Thamine, which affected the third clash. And finally, those who decided to buy the Tier 4 Platinum Starter Pack were receiving the incorrect number of Royal Crystals. There were more bugs when Tier 4 launched, but these are just some of the examples of issues that Amazon faced. Thankfully, players were properly compensated, but these things should have showed up in testing. Again, I just don't know who tests this stuff, right? And a lot of the bugs for the most part are kind of edge cases, right? Because like, why they wouldn't think about running into Thamine and testing that? Like, who's gonna do that, right? Honestly, it should have been something that if it like, unless it was something that was in KR already, right? Who would have known that? There were a lot of bugs that happened in Tier 4 that were definitely edge cases that I think were probably inevitable / like should have been a Smilegate testing thing. AGS doesn't have developers. We all know that, right? Or if they do, it's very minimal efforts. And they probably have a very small QA team as a result as well. So it really is up to Smilegate on a lot of these things to be able to test the game and give us a working and functioning version of the game. So I don't know if we can necessarily blame a lot of this on Amazon. I think like a lot of the stuff that like in terms of response could be attributed to Amazon, but the actual bugs themselves, it's hard to blame a lot of it on them. Again, I think that during this time they were probably focusing, if they did do QA, it probably would have been on Ignite server, and that's where the testing was done. Love to apply as a playtest for Loa. I don't know how you go, but apply for something like that. I also think, and I don't know why, we don't have a PTR. I don't know why we don't have a PTR. I think we should have a PTR and let players go into the game before it comes out. At least not every player, but certain players. If we have PTR, I don't think people play the regular game. Well, I mean, the PTR would only come up before like a major patch, basically. And it wouldn't be given to every player. It will only be given to select players. And personally, I would, and maybe this is selfish, but I would love a PTR just for content. Like maybe you give it to like streamers, right? Because I would love to be able to like before, let's say a big content patch comes out, right? Let's say before Ignite server came out, I got to go in and test Ignite server. And I got to see, okay, here is the most efficient route to get to 1600 to 1620. And then day one, boom, I come out with a guide. Hey guys, here is how you get to 1620 effectively and efficiently, right? That would be helpful for everybody, for new players, for everybody, for me as a content creator. That would be really awesome. And also at the same time, be able to test the game for any issues, right? Again, I think that I don't know how much of this stuff was attributed to Amazon. We can only guess, and my guess is that probably a lot of it's on Smilegate. So there's that. Ignite server exploit, right? Lose-lose situation turned bad. This brings us to, without a doubt, the biggest debacle in Lost Ark has ever seen, and the most recent. Maybe not the biggest in terms of how many players it reached, as long as Fion Gate, without a doubt, takes the crown, because it touched every player. But its effect and implications on the player base and economy are significant. This was a bug that had been found out very early on in the Ignite server's existence, but it took nearly 2 weeks before it was brought to the attention of the masses and Amazon Games. At this point, Amazon swiftly locked the boxes down, essentially stalling any progress for new and returning players, which no doubt damaged their experience greatly in the couple days this took place. But they would later announce the repercussions of opening these boxes. Now, for me, and I'm sure this is out there, right? I've never seen the report. I don't know who reported and what they said about the boxes. So I don't know what the exploit even, like, what the original report of the exploit looked like. Was it very detailed? Was it not? Like, was it, something that they thought couldn't be reproduced, right? And also, you have to think about this. They literally had all of these fires to take care of. And if this bug, and it seemed like this bug, was very limited in exposure, right? It didn't seem like many people knew about it, and probably not many people were exploiting it. what their priority was is take care of the things that are very visible, and then later on, it probably would have stayed very hidden unless until Legalia leaked it, right? If Legalia didn't leak it, it probably would have stayed still pretty hidden. And then when they're done dealing with all the other fires, then they deal with this one, take out the players who exploited it, right? Just ban them or whatever it might be, which probably would have been not that many players, and then they would have been done with it, and it would have been fine. But the problem was it got leaked, and so they had to deal with it immediately. Yeah, the ban wave definitely wouldn't have been as big, because not many players would have taken advantage of it. But that's the thing, right? They probably didn't take care of it and deal with it because it didn't seem like it was super high priority if they did get the right information. And they're like, okay, we got these other fires to take care of. Let's take care of that stuff first. Then we could deal with this, which I think makes sense. But that didn't happen, right? It clearly got leaked, and then they announced repercussions, which are good. I think that the punishments that they announced were good. Amazon Games claimed that 2,300 of these players had participated in this, and only around 1,100 having opened the boxes. And yet, on this precipice of their highly anticipated new raid tier, something that would have helped propel players into exciting Arc passive system, the 2 days after the bans, the number plummeted by 4 to 8,000 players according to the Steam charts. Now, this is really kind of hard to tell exactly, right? It's hard to exactly like attribute like whether or not all those 4 to 8,000 players were the people who got affected by this, or if there were like bots in there as well. So I don't know if we could really throw the conjecture out that, they said there's 2,300 and 1,100 open boxes, and then be like, 4 to 8,000 players, dropped. It could have been many things, right? It could have been a certain number of people just stopped playing the game, and there could be bots that have been banned. I don't know. But potentially, there could have been definitely players who got banned and they didn't let us know. But yeah, the problem then came at the 2 week mark when the first wave of bans was allowed back. Agree or disagree, we think 2 weeks and the removal of all items seemed like a just desserts for anyone who did this once. Amazon even suggested they would calculate the items that were used and deduct their values from the player's gold pool, which only seems fair. Unfortunately, they didn't seem to do that correctly, and this is where things went off the rails. I don't know how they didn't get rid of all these people's items in 2 weeks, but I that was definitely their fault. I don't know why and how this happened. Maybe it was just so many people that did it that they just thought it would take a certain amount and it didn't take that amount. It took longer, but definitely I think they should have said something if that was the case, right? If they're like, "Hey guys, we said it was gonna be a 2 week ban, but unfortunately, it's taking us longer than anticipated to get deal with everybody because of just the sheer amount of people. We said it was gonna be a 2 week ban, but unfortunately, it's gonna take us an extra couple of days, right?" I think that would have been perfectly fine, but they didn't do that. They let people back into the game, and then they still had the items, and then people got banned again. Like, I'm not sure what happened there, but it happened, and apparently there were also boxes that they didn't account for, which I'm assuming that what they're talking about is like they gave us 7 boxes, and the 7th box had more boxes in them. So like technically, even if you only opened 7 boxes, if you opened any of the boxes the 7th box gave you, it was more than 7. So maybe those people who got 2 week bans should have deserved like a month ban, right? I think they did a ban wave, also including the box players. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what went here, but they definitely should have banned. Like, they definitely should have, before letting the players back into the servers, probably should have given a notice like, "Hey, this is what happened, guys. We're sorry. It's taking longer than expected." Then, when the players began to hop back on, they might have noticed while most of the items were taken from the inventory, there were some left behind. And not only that, their goal was the same as it was before, minus 5,000 plus gold they received from the boxes. Amazon quickly took note of this, and later that day, virtually every single unban had been reverted and given 2 additional weeks of suspension. This is the biggest lunacy we've seen from Lost Ark. They were called edge cases by the publisher, yet every single person we had talked to who received the initial 2-week ban punishment was hit with another. I mean, I'm not sure about this one because I think when we were watching the Stoops interview, he talked to somebody who did get the 2-week ban and who never got banned again. So I don't know about that one, but definitely it seemed like the number of people who got hit by this extra ban was definitely large. So it definitely didn't seem exactly like an edge case to me. Looking at the entire situation and talking with a bunch of players, in our opinion, we think Amazon Games just didn't understand the scope or time it would take to filter through every account, and so the initial 2 weeks weren't enough. Instead, they pushed an additional penalty for what seemed like their poor management. They claimed they were using the October 6th update to finalize the removal of items, but we can't find anyone to verify that because they're still all on vacation. I've never witnessed the company's inability to take corrective action more so than Amazon Games. They had all the means of tracking and taking items out of the accounts and reducing gold from anyone who may have used materials they weren't supposed to. And yet, when the first wave of bans was lifted, we saw no punishment inflicted outside of time off. Everyone should feel upset, not necessarily at the players, or maybe those who are bragging about it, but at Amazon Games who failed to do their duty. And because of this, we believe they passed the buck on to the players with additional 2-week suspension, putting them into a pool of basically those who exploited it to the nth degree. Now, again, I think that the extra bans, and I'm not sure if this is the case. There's no way for me to confirm. I do think that from what they've said in their notes and what we've heard from people and just kind of thinking about it logically, I guess, it's probably that originally they counted the boxes, the 7 boxes, as the 7 that they got. But in addition to the 7 boxes, on the 7th box, there were, I think, 2 or 3 more boxes that you can open up after that. That was given by the 7th box. So maybe what happened was they were like, hey, wait a second. These people actually opened more boxes because even though they only opened 7 of the ones that were given to them by the mail, there are actually more boxes open. So these people need to get banned for a longer period of time. And that's what I think is the reason why these people got banned. I'm not sure. There's only a small team of working on removing items from the 2,300 people is going to more than likely take longer than 2 weeks. Yeah, probably. Extra bans are related to old stuff. Some people got away with cheating RMT back then. It wasn't caught. Maybe. But I felt like it was a large, like so many people that it didn't feel like it was just that. But the one that, like, out of all the cases that I've seen so far, right, and out of all the explanations that I've seen so far, I think the one that makes the most sense to me is definitely that, hey, there were 7 boxes total that they gave you, but the 7th box gave you extra boxes. So if you opened those extra boxes, you technically didn't open only 7. You opened 9, 10 boxes, right? That's what makes the most sense to me. Because not everybody who got banned in the initial wave got rebanned. Now, we're not saying that those who partook in the exploit should be given pity by any means, as even if they were curious or didn't understand the ramifications, they should still be met with some sort of disciplinary action. But it's Amazon Games' handling of the entire situation that had left us with a bad taste in our mouths. Now, the Makoko Bootcamp event. With a little work, this could be the best thing for Lost Ark. Yeah, definitely. Finally saw the current Makoko event that has players all hot and bothered. On paper, the latest Makoko event is a phenomenal idea. Agreed. This allows newer players and returning players to hop in existing raids and have fewer gatekeeping experiences. This is because any group that takes a character who has this icon will be given a new form currency at the end of every gate that can be exchanged for exciting rewards such as holding materials or a relic engraving selector, which is immensely valuable. For example, one Adrenaline relic book goes upwards to 300,000 gold at the time of writing. As you can imagine, this is a fantastic idea that helps with arguably the biggest problem of Lost Ark, which is attracting new faces. True. unfortunately, well, not necessarily attracting new players, but keeping new faces. Let's just say. Um, Unfortunately, the parameters for qualifying for the Makoko Leaf have been poorly handled. As you can imagine, this ties in perfectly with the Ignite servers that went live 2 weeks ago before this event launched. But we've been seeing returning players who took advantage of the incredible new system not receiving the Makoko Leaf. On top of that, there are veteran players who have this buff that clearly shouldn't, such as those with a high roster level and even the Eclipse title. This means that they're locked out of the far more impressive rewards for some time while being able to feed their friends. I completely agree with this one. I think that those people who had like Eclipse titles and stuff definitely shouldn't have gotten that Makoko Leaf. Not only just like for the fact that they shouldn't have it, but also they're missing out on rewards, right? That definitely sucks for them. Like, it's like, wait a second, there's this nice shop that gives me something really nice for myself, but now I have to take these because I have this dumbass leaf. I can't get them. That's stupid, right? And I think they could have like made it better by like, maybe giving the same currency to new and returning players, but just having a shop with all the items, right? Clearly, the old players probably wouldn't buy the same items as the new players, and the new players probably wouldn't buy the items of the old players. I don't know why they split it like that. It doesn't make any sense. Higher roster level has nothing to do with XP and raids, though. It's true, but at the same time, the whole reason why you have this Makoko Leaf event is to make it so that these people aren't getting, like, it's to help with gatekeeping, right? But these people with Eclipse titles, these people with Conqueror of Stars, these people with like 300 roster level probably don't have trouble getting into raids. And as a result, they probably don't care about the Makoko Leaf. And they also, again, don't want the rewards from the new player shop. Now, I would be okay if they got the Makoko Leaf, but also on top of that, the shop isn't split by Makoko versus veteran, right? If the shop was just shared between everybody, Makokos and veterans could buy the same items, I think that would make sense. Recently dealt with Amazon support in Lost Ark and they asked me everything, but I did. But did I everything? But did I turn my router on and off and then ghost me? I hear the French support is pretty good. Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, right? I think they could have definitely done a lot better with like who is gonna be eligible for this reward, because it sucks for anybody who like started playing a couple weeks before the Ignite servers and they weren't able to play because like you're a returning player, you're like, hey, I hear this Ignite server stuff is coming into the game. I would love to come back and just check it out before it comes out and then play the Ignite servers when it comes out, right? But then these people end up getting punished because they returned to the game too early. That totally sucks. I don't know why they did that, but it happened. So that is an Amazon thing. That is 100% an Amazon thing. Smilegate was probably not the one who determined this. So this is a far cry from the issues we talked about in the article, but it just shows how Amazon games continue to botch every good idea they come up with. With that said, Amazon games can still recover the Makoko Bootcamp and turn it into one of the best features in the game. All they need to do is modify the conditions to get the Makoko Leaf, change the store every month or two, and make it permanent. Agreed. Let's make Makoko Bootcamp permanent. 100%. When Amazon Games is done right. I've said a lot of negative things about Amazon Games and their handling of Lost Ark, but that's not to say that they're incompetent. Over the last year, we've seen an uptick in their engagement with the community and realized that the Western release needed to be handled differently from Korea. Yes, that was like one of the best things ever. They're actively more involved with events, giving us a lot of materials and means to keep us coming back for more. Even looking at the Ignite servers, while we think that they fumbled it for newer players, it essentially gave veterans a free tier 4 character with minimal effort. We've also, I don't necessarily think they've fumbled new players. Like, it definitely sucked when, like, the boxes were disabled, but I wouldn't say they fumbled it with newer players. It was fine, right? Newer players just had those 2 days where it was sucked, but everything else was all right. We've also received nerfs to raids that not even Korea received, even though it's only a band-aid for what the game needs overall to entice new and returning players. As a publisher, this is the most we could hope for when it comes to difficulty modifications. True. The overall experience players may have with Lost Ark is significantly better than it was 2 years ago, but that isn't exactly saying much. Yeah. Sadly, there's just a thing that we can't really do, which is publisher developer relations. But it seems to be getting better, right? I don't know what is next for Lost Ark in terms of content. The Brashaza raid should be out in a couple of months, and whatever Smilegate announces or whatever they announce at their winter low on will indicate the direction the game will go. In terms of support from Amazon after the latest debacle in the recent bans, we have lost quite a bit of hope in the game in the West. It will no doubt maintain a small, dedicated fan base, but with even that bleeding, content continuing to be stricter and stricter, and Amazon's clumsiness being shown in full force, the future has never looked grimmer, and for arguably the best MMORPG in the market. I agree that is definitely one of the best MMORPGs in the market. And I definitely do agree that Amazon has botched a lot of things. And recently, with all these things that have happened, there definitely leaves a lot to be desired. Again, not all of it, I think, is Amazon's fault, but they definitely do have a part to play in everything that has happened. Now, what I will say is that I think that at the end of the day, most Korean MMOs are extremely niche. And it's no surprise that we don't see a single Korean MMO that has like mainstream popularity. It might have mainstream popularity at the beginning of the game, but over time, all of them do fizzle down to about 20 to 50,000 concurrents. And that's just the inevitability of the type of games these are. And the fact that they're published by Korea and developed by Korea and usually have a Western publisher makes it really hard for us to make the game truly fit for our region. And with that, I think that even if AGS did not mess up at all, even if everything was handled with flying colors and none of these fuck ups existed, I still think that our game would probably still be around the number of players we have today. Maybe a little bit higher. Right now it's like 23 to 25k concurrents. Maybe it might be 40k. Maybe 50k at the most. But definitely nothing beyond that. And I think that at the end of the day is just the inevitable truth and inevitable direction that these games go towards. The casuals get weeded out, yes. And it's not just the casuals too. Like, there's just so many features in the game and like so many like there's so many like things in the game that are just not friendly towards Western audiences. Even down to just the basic premise of that you can pay to win for the game. Like, Western players are so against pay to win in the games, which I understand. But the thing is, like, the pay to win is not that bad. I mean, it's bad. It's not great, right? But it's nowhere like what pay to win was back in the day, where literally if you didn't pay, you basically were at a huge disadvantage compared to everybody else, and you probably couldn't do the latest content. But yeah. Honestly, they make PvP better. I think we get more players. It's the only bad comment in the game. It's hard to say because there's no real successful PvP MMO out there. Now, Throne and Liberty could potentially be considered as one, right? But I think it's just too early to tell. Like, Throne and Liberty also is not doing amazing. Throne and Liberty has been losing players basically at the same rate as Lost Ark has been, or it did in the past. It's an alright article. You say it's a little doomer. It is, but at the same time, I don't think that it's unwarranted. Playback is not like talking about things and just making things doomer just for doomer's sake, right? These are all definitely very valid criticisms.